Hey everyone, it's Ryan with SRG or S Reaper G or just Ryan if you hate any of those names or both of those names. Now, I had planned to do a whole video on the Cyberpunk leaks, discussing them. I thought something was a little off about them. I don't know what it was, something just seemed a bit off about these leaks. So I held off, and especially if you do some research, you'd probably see that some of this stuff is not true, or at least is a little strange, or just seems to come out of nowhere, or it's based on other leaks that were already debunked. And today we have word in response to Paul Tassie's article, who is a games journalist on Forbes, from CD Projekt Red's PR director or global PR director, Radek Grabowski, that those leaks are simply not adding up. They do not add up. With him saying, this thing does not add up. Sorry, Paul. And let me just say, on behalf of everybody who knows Paul, I don't know Paul, but I just want to say sorry as well, Paul. Sorry, Paul. So that's that. I'm kind of glad I didn't do that original video that I had written out, or make this video as is, because like sometimes with these stories, you need to kind of just sit on the information a bit, maybe for like a day or two, and to see if anything else comes out, see if you can kind of determine what is true and what isn't. And you could conclude that the video should just end here, and maybe it will, but it won't, because I still want to talk about what was in these leaks or supposed leaks and kind of go through it with you piece by piece. Now, if that doesn't interest you at all, then I don't know what to tell you. Bye. I think there's kind of multiple parts to these leaks, in my opinion. My mind basically goes to how I see it as what is not too far off or far-fetched, but also might not be exactly true in the way it's described. The wishful thinking part of the whole ordeal, what we want to happen but might not. The essentially regurgitating of an earlier alleged leaks that were already debunked, and some strange ones that don't really make too much sense if you really just think about them for more than like a couple minutes. Like catching monsters and making them perform or fight in JRPG like battles. Like what? What? The information we are looking at today comes from the Gaming Leaks and Rumors Subreddit, posted by user Canic. I don't know if I said that right, but it doesn't really matter. That's the name right here. You can see it on your screen. It itself is being shared from 4chan. Cyberpunk Next Gen Patch 1.5 will be treated as a soft relaunch for the game. Game will be renamed Cyberpunk 2077 Samurai Edition. This may not be exactly true, but I don't think this claim is too far-fetched actually to be so far from reality. I could see them launching the PS5 and Series X versions of the game kind of like this, if not with this name, at least treating it as kind of a soft relaunch, maybe a soft reboot of the original launch. Probably like low-hanging fruit, like an easy thing to just kind of guesstimate, because there's definitely a naming convention with some current gen upgrades that aren't the traditional like, oh, so-and-so remastered. S Reaper G remastered. So this is an easy kind of okay, possibly kind of assumption to make. As for it being a soft relaunch of the game, I think maybe that's just an easy assumption to make based on what they have to do with the relaunch, or at least the remaster or the upgrade of this game. Even if it's not marketed that way, this might be CD Projekt Red's way of launching the game in hopefully a much better state than it was originally. It's like, could this be how they're thinking of it internally? I'm sure that there's some kind of thinking around that. Maybe, and I guess you couldn't take it however you want, but I think that's just a rather easy kind of claim to make based on what we know already. And also, if you remember, there were leaks. There were leaks about a year ago, maybe less than a year ago, maybe less than a year ago, that CD Projekt Red was probably looking at to do a kind of like No Man's Sky style comeback for Cyberpunk 2077, which CD Projekt Red shortly after that whole claim was made said that that's just not true. That's not at all what they're thinking about it. I also feel like I need to remind everyone, I need to remind all of you out there that there is no comeback for a game that sold over 13 million copies. There's nothing to come back from. There's just nothing to come back from. The state of the game, sure, the state of the game, how it performs, sure. But this is more a blow to their reputation than anything else. There's nothing to come back from a sales front. CD Projekt Red will do a big live stream around February to reveal the patch, the Cyberpunk anime, and the first expansion. New patch features barbershops, a garage, improved AI, transmog system, a complete rebalancing of the loot system, and new UI. The promised free DLC will be bundled in and includes 4 new weapons, New Game Plus, apartment customization, and new gigs. Obviously, I like the sound of all that, and we know CD Projekt Red loves doing those live streams and making a big show of everything, and they have a large enough fan base, I think, even with all of that's happened with Cyberpunk, to command a lot of airtime and also a lot of the traffic on these gaming sites. What people are curious about or just want to see what happens. Will that happen? In truth, I could see them doing just a kind of tweet of the announcement of the patch, or sending like kind of like a wall of text, or just a link to show you what's going to be in the patch, and it'll get the same amount of coverage no matter what. But a live stream would also probably get a lot of buzz, so they could really go either way with it. And again, the game sold incredibly well, so there's no doubt that there's going to be a lot of press on top of this release regardless, because even so, it's still a high profile game. It's still a high profile release. It's safe to say, I think at this point, we are moving into wishful thinking territory. I say that because you see stuff that just sounds really good and it sounds really promising, but it's too good to be true. It really is. For example, one of the things I always have lamented about my time with Cyberpunk was how the city seemed full of life, but simultaneously lifeless at the same time. You got street cred, but people would bump into you on the street and just not give even the slightest of shits. Improved AI is probably a thing that will be added, but it's not like a verifiable, this leak is accurate kind of thing. It's just, yeah, well, why wouldn't they? Or shouldn't they try to improve the AI? I mean, they've already taken steps to patch the game, why wouldn't they just keep doing that? And I think it's necessary for this game going forward to these new updates that they address a lot of those underlying issues with the game if they can. But adding like barbershops, a garage, apartment customization, it sounds cool, and I'm sure maybe some of it will at some point make it in, but it sounds a bit like Grand Theft Auto Online more than it does Cyberpunk. Now, I don't doubt that some of it could maybe make it into the game at some point, but I doubt any of that is true. Maybe some of these will be necessary improvements or additions at some point, but it's obvious at least that they're not exactly going for that here. Again, to me, this just all sounds more like GTA than Cyberpunk with all of that, or GTA Online. Anyway, let's continue. Tons of small stuff like Judy and Pan Am sending you more text messages during the course of the game. First expansion takes place in Pacifica, which in actuality is quite huge. You walk around and do quests in what is called the Combat Zone. The Combat Zone is being fought over by 2 new gangs, the Bozos, violent clown psychopaths with a sick sense of humor, and a gang called Slaughterhouse, violent psychopath fascists. Walking around the Combat Zone feels very inspired by the game Stalker. Okay, so the romances. I have been pretty open, I think, about my dislike, or at least when I've talked about this game, my dislike for the way romances are handled in Cyberpunk 2077, and that's not because I think the characters are interesting or good. I know it's not a dating sim, so maybe this complaint falls on deaf ears, but it's similarly how in BioWare games, the romances are often criticized as beginning or being just a sex scene, and that's the end of it. That's the payoff. It's kind of how they are in Cyberpunk. Judy and Pan Am, they do text you and whatnot, but there's not that real feeling of a relationship beyond your choices towards the end of the game. And look, I really don't see how more text messages would make that any better. And even then, that just sounds incredibly fucking silly to add just a few extra text messages into the game. For what purpose? What does it add? Seriously, it kind of reminds me of when No Man's Sky came out, because I would tell my friends, oh, they're adding a DLC to add in 30 more planets. And they'd say, wait, really? They're doing that? And I'd say, no, they're fucking not doing that. The game has billions of planets. Why would they just add a DLC or add an update that adds 30 more? That makes no fucking sense. I know that's not a perfect analogy, but it's similar, right? Tell me I'm not like just sounding crazy here. The leak also purports to introduce new gangs and areas in Pacifica. Some users have pointed out that Pacifica already has factions within it trying to vie for control or for power. So it seems a bit of a bizarre choice, if true, to just randomly introduce more factions. If you remember all those Night City wires that CD Projekt Red did, they streamed them. It was obvious that they took a lot of time to develop the lore and the history of this world that they created or were building. So why randomly just scrap some factions or put them by the wayside to just introduce new ones to the conflict or to the story, to the world? And is the expansion going to have new areas to explore? I'm sure it will. Why wouldn't it? But that's just the biggest assumption any of us could have made. Like, I could have told you that, and they don't even know anything about it. Cyberpunk will get its own Gwent-like minigame. It involves going to cyberspace and controlling and collecting monsters, which you can send to JRPG-like battles, and also has multiplayer. One of those monsters looks like the Reaper. Another one I saw looks like an Oni. Now, given the popularity of Gwent, this actually wouldn't be entirely surprising if they did build some kind of mini game that they wanted to then build, at least in size, in scope, to the scale of Gwent, or how Gwent has become its own kind of game. But some of this just sounds like kind of silly. Catching monsters and collecting them. Okay, fine. That's fine for, like, I don't know, Pokemon. But for Cyberpunk, I don't know about that. I mean, maybe there's a way to do it, but that doesn't sound interesting to me at all. That doesn't sound like this type of game. It also goes back to my point about Pacifica's factions. They already have daemons and hacks in this mysterious cyberspace in the game. It would be a rather bizarre twist of fate for them to include it in a mini game before they include it in the game proper or in an expansion or a new game entirely like they originally intended to. The Cyberpunk anime called Cyberpunk 2077 Edgerunners is made by Studio Trigger with writing and story made by CD Projekt Red themselves. It looks absolutely insane, beautiful 2D animation that reminds me of Akira. Okay, now again, that sounds cool, but I have to mention what others on this Reddit thread were mentioning or saying. Let me point to where it says, with writing and story made by CD Projekt Red themselves. A quick search on Google or anywhere else proves this to be false, or at least misleading. The charitable read of this claim is that they meant that CD Projekt Red is working with them to craft the narrative, but the other way of looking at it is that they're just not being accurate. They're lying, or it's false. I mean, even in Cyberpunk's website announcing the anime, it says here, and the adapted screenplay by Yoshiki Usa of SSSS Gridman, Promare, and Masashiko Atsuka, Gurren Lagann, Kill la Kill, and Promare. Another expansion is in early stages of planning, but will only be released if the first expansion is a success. I feel like people, especially this leaker, quote unquote leaker, don't really or fully comprehend Cyberpunk's runaway success. Not in how it launched in such a poor state. We think about Cyberpunk as a total failure because of its various performance issues on the base consoles of PS4 and Xbox at launch, and that's all true. But the game sold over 13 million copies, so if anyone thinks this game is going anywhere, at least in the public consciousness, for consideration for other things or just being played or talked about, I'm skeptical of that. I don't see CD Projekt Red not banking on it doing well. I'm sure it'll do fine. Fuck, I'm probably gonna buy the expansions when they come out. So to say that they're not planning on doing the second expansion depending on how the first one does or vice versa, whatever it is, that's just doesn't seem accurate, or it doesn't seem like they're not having a long-term plan for how they're going to tackle the expansions. But I really do think a lot of these are more wishful thinking mixed with already debunked rumors and leaks, as well as some vague, no-brainer assumptions that any of us can make, like, oh, you're going to go to new areas. Yeah, we know. A lot of this does sound really cool, and if it was added to Cyberpunk, that would be kind of neat to see. Cyberpunk is a good game underneath all of its issues, and I've said that multiple times, if not on video, at least in general. I've said that many times. And I've said this many times as well, again, maybe not a video, but just in general, that this launch and release has been handled so poorly, and that CD Projekt Red has and needs to continue just to be quiet until things are ready. And it's frustrating, but as annoying as it can be, it's probably for the best. And it's like I said at the top, this CD Projekt Red has already said that these leaks are just not true or they don't add up. And it's not just some Joe Schmo. The director of CD Projekt Red Global PR has said that they're not true. I think this also speaks, this whole story, the last couple days of worth of news, also speaks to the problem with games journalism and the state that it's in. Outlets wasted no time in reporting on these leaks that were posted onto Reddit, but regurgitated from some dude on 4chan. Yeah, of course, they frame it as, oh, it's just rumors, it's not official, you shouldn't listen to this. But I expect that more from YouTubers like myself, talking about whatever the hell we want to talk about for as long as we can, talking into a mic, into a camera, because that's what we do. We don't have the resources and even the sources of journalists or insiders. Now, some do, but I don't. So you should expect idiots like myself to post videos talking about leaks and rumors or whatever fucking else I want to talk about, which I almost did, mind you. Not outlets just immediately reporting any bit of news or information they see or read online, especially when some of this just doesn't really add up or make much sense. And the guy who made the post of the leaks on 4chan even says in the image here, can't tell you how I know this stuff. And ask me anything other than how I know this stuff. Like, really, man? My dude, just take your word for it? Why? Come on, man. Really? Anyway, I have rambled enough. I'm sorry if I ranted a bit towards the end there, but ultimately, I want to know what you're thinking and feeling about this whole thing. It's not really a whole thing. I don't mean to make it sound like it's a big thing, but I just want to know, are you willing to go back and possibly pay for new content for Cyberpunk at this point? Do you even care about Cyberpunk at this point? Let me know down below. Of course, make sure you like and dislike the video depending on how you feel about it. And if you want to see more content like this, or Cyberpunk content, Mass Effect, KOTOR, or other types of gaming related content, please subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you, and you can watch me rant and rave about other weird things and talking to a mic for seemingly too long. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all soon.